Okay, so today we're diving into some pretty intense stuff.
Yeah.
We're looking at The Green Book
Oh, wow.
by Muammar Gaddafi.
Yeah,
Talk about a controversial figure, right?
absolutely.
I mean, his book is no less provocative.
Yeah, it's basically his plan for like a utopia,
Right.
like a perfect world, according
Yeah.
to him.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
And his vision is certainly unique, to say the least,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to democracy.
Uh-huh.
This first section, the solution of the problem of democracy, the authority of the people, it kind of throws down the gauntlet.
He doesn't mess around.
He doesn't mess around at all.
He's not just critiquing existing systems.
Right.
He's like getting rid of them completely.
Yeah, he wants to dismantle them.
Parliaments,
Oh, God.
political parties.
Forget about it.
He sees all of that as like inherently flawed
Right.
tools of oppression,
Yeah.
not real expressions of what people actually want.
Yeah, so what's he proposing instead?
Direct democracy.
Direct democracy on a massive scale.
Huge scale.
Right.
Popular conferences,
Yeah.
people's committees.
It's like he wants every citizen to be a mini politician.
Exactly. And
Wow.
all those decisions at the local level,
Uh-huh.
they would like feed up to a General People's Congress.
Wow.
It's a bold idea.
It is bold.
But like logistically, is it workable?
Yeah.
Could you really get millions of people to
Yeah.
participate in these complex
Yeah.
political decisions?
Well, I mean, think about like
Yeah.
a simple town hall meeting.
Right.
It can already get kind of
Yeah.
chaotic.
Yeah.
Right.
But maybe that's part of his point.
Yeah.
He doesn't trust anything
Right.
that puts power in the hands of a few.
Even if it's
Yeah.
democratically elected.
Right.
And that distrust extends to political parties.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
He sees those as just another form of dictatorship.
Yeah. Just representing a small group,
Yeah.
not the whole.
It's almost like he's saying any group
Right.
gets corrupted by power.
Which is a little ironic,
It is a little ironic.
considering he was in power for decades.
For a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you think his own experience
It crosses.
shapes these views? Was
Yeah.
he like projecting his own
Could be.
kind of methods
Yeah.
onto these systems?
His rejection of parties
Right.
and like representation in general,
Yeah,
it feels very personal.
it does.
Like he's speaking from experience.
And it's not just about politics either.
No.
He applies this to class as well.
Class systems too.
Class systems too.
Yeah, he thinks they're divisive.
Yeah.
And they always lead to one group dominating another.
Yeah. He uses this example of the working class
Uh-huh.
inheriting a society.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And he says, even if they dismantle
Right.
class structure,
Hmm.
they'll just eventually
Yeah.
develop their own
Yep. Their own
internal divisions
new hierarchies.
and repeat the cycle.
It's a cycle.
So it's like he's saying human nature is the problem.
Like we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes.
Right.
It's a pretty pessimistic view
It is pretty bleak.
of human nature.
And then he gets to constitutions.
Oh boy.
And I mean, in most democracies, constitutions are like,
The foundation.
right,
They're supposed to protect us from tyranny.
exactly.
But Gaddafi's like, nah, those are meaningless.
He thinks they're meaningless.
Basically artificial.
Yeah.
Easy to manipulate.
So what does he want instead?
He wants natural law
Natural law.
based on tradition and religion.
But like, who gets to interpret those?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What happens when different groups
Right.
have conflicting interpretations?
Yeah. He doesn't really address that.
Right.
He's more interested in the big picture,
Yeah.
the philosophy of it all.
His solution for a just society
Right.
is the people themselves.
The people.
This self-regulation through these
Yeah.
popular conferences and people's committees.
It's like you're saying, if everyone has power,
Yeah.
then nobody can abuse it.
Yeah.
But is that realistic?
Right.
I mean, even in small groups,
Yeah.
you always have people who want to be in charge.
Right.
Could it really be self-regulating?
Yeah. Is that even possible?
Or would it just create new ways for people to manipulate the system?
And it's not just government either.
Right.
He applies the same skepticism to the media.
The media, too.
He says privately owned outlets
Yeah.
are just representing
The rich and power.
the wealthy and powerful.
Exactly.
Right.
Not the people.
So what's his solution for that?
People's committees should run the media.
But then who controls the committees?
Good point.
Wouldn't that just be another form of censorship?
It seems like no matter what you do,
Right.
there's always a chance for abuse.
There's always a way for someone to take advantage.
Yeah. That's the tension in Gaddafi's thinking. He
Like-
wants to empower people,
Uh-huh.
but he doesn't trust anyone with power.
It's a tough needle to thread.
It is.
So we've got this world, okay,
without parliaments,
right,
without parties,
no party,
without even constitutions.
Wow.
All the powers with the people, guided by tradition and religion.
It's certainly a radical vision.
It's radical.
But before we get too deep into all of that,
yeah,
let's look at how he applies this to economics.
right. Because I have a feeling
Oh, it gets even more interesting.
it gets wilder from here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we looked at Gaddafi's take on democracy, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
So now, how does he think we should, restructure the economy?
Well, he gets right to it in part 2.
Okay.
The solution of the economic problem. Socialism.
Okay.
He comes out strong saying that the wage system is like the root of all economic injustice.
That's a big claim.
It's a bold statement for sure.
So, why does he think that?
So basically he says that workers are basically slaves.
Oh.
As long as they don't own, the means of production or have direct control over what they make.
They're just trading their time for a paycheck.
Okay.
But they don't really own
Yeah.
or have a say in, what they're creating.
So it's not just about who owns the factories and stuff.
Right.
It's like the whole power dynamic.
Exactly.
Being a wage worker.
It's built on exploitation.
Yeah.
He's saying.
And he's not just critiquing, capitalism here.
No, he's rejecting private ownership and state ownership.
Even in a socialist system.
Even in a socialist system, he's saying.
Workers are still wage earners.
They're still beholden to the state.
Okay, so if we're abolishing wages,
Okay.
then what's the alternative?
So he proposes this natural socialist system
Okay.
where everybody involved in making something,
Mm-hmm.
from the raw materials to the finished product,
Yeah.
they all get an equal share of the benefits.
So it's not about redistributing wealth.
Right.
It's totally rethinking how we think about work and reward.
Yeah.
Everyone gets an equal slice.
Equal slice of the pie.
But how would you even start to do that?
That's the question, isn't it?
In a complex, modern economy?
Yeah, you've got global supply chains,
Right.
financial markets,
It's very complicated.
specialized industries.
How do you make that work?
It's a tough one.
And he doesn't just stop at wages.
So,
He talks about housing,
yeah.
income, transportation.
All the essentials.
Yeah, he says these shouldn't be controlled by anyone.
Right.
Everyone should just have access to them.
Like basic human rights,
Yeah, human rights.
not things to be bought and sold.
And this also applies to land,
Oh, yeah.
which I feel is even more radical.
Land should belong to no one, he says. It's a shared resource.
So no private property.
Nope.
No buying or selling land.
It's a bold idea.
It's a very bold idea.
It connects to a lot of historical debates
Yeah.
about, land reform.
Right, and these communal ownership models.
Exactly.
But is it realistic?
It's a good question.
Land is finite.
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't this lead to conflict over who gets to use what?
Yeah, those are valid concerns.
And Gaddafi doesn't really offer any solutions for those, does he?
Not really. He's more focused on the big picture,
Yeah.
the principles.
The principles of this ideal society.
Exactly.
And another principle is this rejection of profit
Oh, yeah. He hates the idea of profit.
as the main motivation for economic activity.
He sees it as exploitation.
So instead of making as much money as possible, he
Correct.
wants to just focus on meeting people's needs.
Everyone should have a good quality of life.
It's a noble goal,
It is.
but is it actually achievable?
How do you get people to innovate,
Yeah,
to be more productive?
if there's no reward for it.
If you take away individual gain,
Don't you need at least some competition
it's a tough one.
to make progress?
He doesn't really answer that.
He also critiques domestic service pretty harshly.
Yeah. He calls it modern-day slavery.
Why do you think he focuses on that?
Well, he sees domestic workers as really vulnerable because their work is often undervalued.
Yeah.
And they don't have the same protections as other workers.
Right. It's hidden.
Yeah, it happens in people's homes.
It's hard to regulate.
It's
So it makes you think about these power dynamics that we
Mhm.
might not even notice
in our own home.
in our own lives.
That's a good point.
So Gaddafi's economic vision, it's radical
It is.
and maybe not that practical,
Maybe not.
but it makes us think about
Yeah,
how our societies are structured
it does.
and the values behind our economic systems.
And whether there might be a better way.
Yeah. What if there's a better way to do things?
It's a lot to think about.
All right. Well, before we get too deep into all the economic stuff,
Yeah.
let's move on to the final part of Gaddafi's book,
Okay.
where he really digs into the social fabric of his ideal society.
That's social stuff.
Yeah. I feel like this is where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets wild.
Okay, so we've covered Gaddafi's ideas about democracy and economics.
Pretty radical stuff.
Pretty radical stuff.
Yeah.
Now let's get into like the social side of things.
Okay.
This last part, the social basis of the third universal theory.
Mm-hmm.
This is where he really gets into like family, tribe, nation.
The building blocks
Yeah.
of society.
Yeah, and right away,
Yeah.
he says that the social factor
Okay.
and like nationalism specifically
Yeah.
is the driving force of history.
It's what makes us tick.
So it's like our sense of belonging,
Yeah.
our loyalty to these groups.
So our family, our tribe, our nation.
Yeah, that's what shapes the course of human events.
He's saying those bonds are like
Yeah,
the threads that weave the tapestry of history.
I like that.
It's a good image.
And for him, the most important group
Mm-hmm.
is the family,
The family is everything.
a foundation of everything.
It's natural.
Yeah,
It's organic.
provides security,
Now-
values.
Passes on traditions.
So he's a big fan of like traditional family values then.
Oh, yeah. He's very much in that camp.
It's interesting to think about this in like the 21st century though, right?
It is.
Like we're seeing all these different kinds of families now.
More diversity, more individual freedom,
Yeah.
changing gender roles.
Like how does his vision fit in with all of that?
Yeah, it's a tough question.
And it's not just about like the immediate family either.
No.
He talks about the tribe.
The tribe is like an extended family.
Right, this bigger social unit.
Yeah, providing that sense of belonging.
He even says that like tribal traditions
Really?
are better than school
Interesting.
for shaping people's character.
So learning by doing.
Yeah.
Absorbing the wisdom of your community.
Yeah,
Through experience.
but then doesn't that lead to conformity?
That's a good point.
Like what about individual freedom?
Yeah, and tribalism can be used to justify bad things too.
Right, it can be very exclusionary.
Exactly.
So how do you balance that with his ideas about like individual rights?
It's a tough one.
And he does talk about national loyalty too. But he also warns against like fanaticism.
Blind allegiance.
Yeah.
He doesn't want national pride to turn into hatred.
So it's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Between being proud of your nation,
Mm-hmm.
but also recognizing that
Yeah.
we're all part of something bigger.
Part of the human family.
Which I think leads into his views on the nation state.
Okay.
He thinks that's the most like natural and enduring form of government.
Interesting.
He says that empires and like these multinational states,
Yeah.
they're unstable.
Because they're trying to force different people together
Yeah.
who don't necessarily want to be together.
But you see this happening today, right?
Oh, yeah. All over the world.
With all these different groups
Separatist movements.
wanting to break away.
It's a big question for our time.
Yeah, how do you balance unity and diversity?
How do you create a society where everyone feels like they belong?
It's a tough one.
And then gets into the role of women. Okay, this is always interesting. With
It's so
Gaddafi.
complex.
Yeah.
Because on one hand,
Uh-huh.
he's advocating for women's rights.
Yeah.
He's saying that societies that like force women into
Yeah.
these really narrow roles,
Limiting their opportunities.
yes, that's bad.
That's bad.
But then on the other hand,
He also has some pretty traditional views
very traditional views.
about women's place in society.
Yeah.
About motherhood.
So it's this mix of like progressive and traditional ideas.
And it's hard to reconcile those
It's
sometimes.
difficult.
He also makes some predictions about the future.
Okay.
Like he thinks that black people are going to become
Wow.
like a dominant force in the world.
Interesting.
He talks about demographics
Mhm.
and historical injustices.
And that this will eventually lead to like a shift in global power.
It's a vision of a more just world
Yeah.
where the wrongs of the past are corrected.
And speaking of challenging the status quo,
Yeah.
he also criticizes like standardized education.
Oh, really?
He thinks it stifles creativity,
Interesting.
limits people's choices.
So he's all about educational freedom,
Yeah, letting people choose what they want to learn,
empowering people to follow their passions.
not just forcing everyone into the same mold.
And he talks about culture, too.
Yeah, he says that we shouldn't try to impose
Right.
one culture's art on other people.
We should celebrate our differences,
Appreciate all the different cultures.
embrace diversity,
And finally, he talks about how we should be more active.
more active.
Yeah, he doesn't like this idea of just
Yeah.
sitting around watching other people do things.
Like spectators.
Yeah, like watching sports or entertainment.
Uh-huh.
He's like, why would you just watch other people live their lives?
Get involved.
Yeah.
Participate.
You're not a part of it.
So it's a call to action.
Yeah.
Like really live your life.
And shape your community.
Don't just sit on the sidelines.
So that's Gaddafi's Green Book.
Yeah.
A very complex and contradictory vision.
Radical
Idealistic.
and flawed.
But it definitely makes you think about a lot of different things.
About how we organize our societies.
About power.
about justice.
Was he a visionary or a tyrant?
I don't know.
A genius or a madman?
It's up to you to decide.
What do you think?
What parts resonate with you?
What do you agree with?
What do you disagree with?
The Green Book is a challenge to conventional thinking.
It is.
It forces you to see the world in a new way.
And that's what the deep dive is all about.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.